and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA, a country in constitutional crisis. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. Who knows what it'll be like by the time people see the show? Everything could be fine. Certainly everything will be forgotten by then.
Well, I hope over the course of the show we can explore what it would take to make the country fine again.
No, there's no chance we can do that.
Okay. Well, as we go to press here, President Trump is, beyond what he's doing with the FBI, is getting busy stacking the federal courts with far right-wingers, and he appointed alleged, I guess I should say, sexual harasser to a top State Department post.
As you remember, the U.S. House repealed the Affordable Care Act, sort of, including a gutting of Medicaid. That, if it should pass, which, you know, in these days, who knows, would be a big threat to people with AIDS and the long-term health of most Americans.
You'd be surprised how we all rely upon Medicaid when the time comes. Trump's executive order on religious liberty continues his destruction of the wall between church and state. It's not the one that we expected last week, but it's bad.
Wasn't that about 6 months ago? Feels like it. The governors of Tennessee and Alabama have signed anti-LGBT bills.
And 20 states are moving to criminalize protest.
Not before we go to Trump Tower today.
Yes, we're headed there after we tape now.
In Colorado, Republicans have blocked a lesbian appointment to the state Civil Rights Commission.
Activist Gilbert Baker, the creator of the rainbow flag, will be remembered at a memorial march in Greenwich Village on June 14th, Flag Day, starting at the Stonewall.
Unfortunately, also Trump's birthday. Chelsea Manning is set to be released from federal prison next week.
And I'll give you my review of Pacific Overtures, starring George Takei. First time I've seen that show by Stephen Sondheim.
I just want to say one thing.
Yes.
I mean, we can't talk so much about the FBI thing because who knows what will happen in the next 3 minutes, let alone the next 48 hours before people see this on the weekend or whatever. But I just have to keep one overarching thing in mind. Aside from the fact that Trump is a moron and a maniac, he has absolutely no experience of public service. He has no moral compass.
There's no love for the country.
He has no understanding of what it is to answer to anyone, and he is a bully. And so everything he does is done from that mindset of, I'm going to do what I want to do. No one is going to tell me what to do. And I have no dedication to anyone but me and maybe my family.
And he is invested with...
Some of my family.
And he is invested with enormous power as President of the United States.
And is successfully bullying everyone around him to go along with what he says. Right. Although I hope by the time you see this that somebody will have spoken up in rebellion.
Now, I mean, you can argue, I would say he is not using a lot of the power he has, and that he seems incapable of choosing people to run federal departments. If you're in favor of the
he doesn't want people.
If you would let me finish. If you are in favor of the destruction of the federal government,
he is.
I guess that's the way to go.
That is
However,
But that's the mistake people make. They keep trying to judge him by normal standards. And what they have to understand is that this is the Steve Bannon destruction of the government. And when you fire the FBI director because he is, for all our mixed opinions of him, trying to do an investigation of the president, and you fire the acting Attorney General Sally Yates, and you fire all the U.S. attorneys, including Preet Bharara, and you don't fill all these jobs, you are trying to destroy the government.
Yes.
And when you put in as the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who wants a theocracy, not a rule of civil law, that is what's going on. They're trying to destroy the government.
Yes. And aiding them in that will be the federal judges that they're going to appoint.
Bingo, there's your segue.
I mean, now, he's already started nominating judges. He made 10 more appointments that have to be cleared by the Senate this week. He had already nominated a guy named Amul Thapar, Thapar, for the Sixth Circuit. This is a guy who issued a ruling that the male victim of sexual harassment couldn't file a Title VII claim because he couldn't prove that his male tormentor was gay. This is seriously.
What does that have to do with anything?
Exactly, but you're going to get a lot of decisions like that as time goes on because they're just going to make happen what they want to happen. So what are we going to do? I mean, he's got 130 openings because Obama wasn't able to confirm anybody.
Of federal judgeships.
Of federal judges to the circuits. These are life appointments, folks, and he selected, a list of horrors of people. Now, what power do the Democrats have to stop this? The Democrats themselves.
They have a traditional power, but it may or may not work.
Right. I mean, in the past, you could filibuster. The Democrats dropped that for federal judges because they couldn't.
No, the power they have is that traditionally, senators are allowed to veto judges appointed from their states.
It's something called a blue slip that they're able to put on an appointment. This person is from your state. You are allowed to do this. It's especially helpful when you have two Democratic senators, as we do in Minnesota. But the Republicans have already signaled, hey, if Democrats start blue slipping our people, we're determined to do this.
The blue slip is actually approval of a nominee, but it is a system of allowing senators the right to approve or disapprove. Yes. Yeah. But yes, I don't think the Republicans will respect that tradition.
So, they're not doing it on a bipartisan basis.
All right, so keep your eye on those judicial appointments. Meanwhile, the good news is that the horror show who was going to be appointed Secretary of the Army withdrew after all the bad news that came out of him him. Mark Green, the state senator from Tennessee. Now, one of our viewers is upset about this because he says we should have let him go through because he hates LGBT people so much that none of us would have joined the Army.
Well,
look, theoretically, okay.
I'm not a booster of the war machine. I think we spend entirely we have bad foreign policies that you misuse these folks. We waste a tremendous amount of money on it, but we already have a commander-in-chief who was a monster, and that doesn't seem to be driving people away from service yet. I don't know. I haven't seen the stats on that.
Well, let's see how many.
It would be nice to think so.
Let's see how many people he sends back into combat, and then how that plays out.
And as Ann mentioned, we are going to be heading off to a protest about this, about the FBI situation. But more than 20 states have filed bills that would crack down on protests. Now look at what there are 30 separate bills in 20 states. Listen to what some of these things would do. It would ban protesters from wearing masks. We already have an anti-mask law in New York. But it also would protect drivers from liability if they strike someone taking part in a protest.
Oh, good. I have a car. I can go after a few of the Trump supporters.
God, it's just, the ACLU says they're ready to file suit against this. It's an unprecedented level of hostility towards the First Amendment. No, but we have to be on the. Hey, we're going to talk about bills that have passed. So let's
concentrate on what's actually happening.
And let's be careful about these kinds of things that will pass if we're not vigilant.
And let's look at one more appointment to the State Department. The Assistant Chief of Visits, who would be escorting foreign dignitaries. They're talking about a guy named Stephen Munoz, who is accused of, when he was an undergrad at the Citadel, sexually assaulting 5 different guys.
Yes. The prosecutors looked into it, didn't ultimately file suit, but the school actually said that the reports were credible.
Exactly. And also criminal, he worked for Rick Santorum. Now...
Well,
all right.
I think we should talk about the other big news of the week. Again, it happened about 100 years ago, which was the House repeal of Obamacare.
Okay, and then we can go on to the religious executive order.
Of the Affordable Care Act. Because, again,
although, again, this may be going nowhere. Let's put that headline on it, too.
When you look at the senators that McConnell put on the committee to draft the Senate bill, it does not inspire confidence. They finally were shamed into putting a woman on the panel.
Did they finally?
I believe
he was defending not putting a woman on.
I thought that they did add a woman to the panel. I'm forgetting who. But it's not one of the good people. Anyway, folks, this is all about cutting taxes and cutting Medicaid in order to do that. And I just, again, want to make people aware. When you hear Medicaid, maybe you don't even know what it means. We think of it as the medical care for the poor. But it is the thing that helps most kids in special education. It is the thing that most elderly people rely upon when they go into nursing homes, because you quickly spend down your income, and then you are shifted onto Medicaid so that you aren't thrown out into the street.
It covers tens of millions of people.
Even 2/3 goes to the elderly and the disabled. Even though the elderly are covered by Medicare, Medicare doesn't cover nursing homes. Medicaid does when you run out of your money. And most people do run out of their money in our ridiculous system. So, all these people who are supporting this, you're going to have to either take care of your elderly parents or throw them out in the street.
Well, the Senate is going to rewrite this, but we do have to be vigilant about what it will include and whether Medicaid will remain slashed to the tune of $900 billion, whether pre-existing conditions will be much more expensive.
And AIDS is at the top of that list.
Look, anything is a pre-existing condition. Living is a pre-existing
Surviving domestic
condition.
violence is a pre-existing condition. Now, in New
Planned Parenthood is defunded in the House bill, and there are raids on the Medicare Trust Fund.
Right. Now, to get this passed, they had to bribe some Republicans, and 2 upstate New York Republicans forced them to put into this bill that New York State will have to pick up the Medicaid costs for the counties, except for New York City, where we have 5 counties. They're exempted from this, and this is it's a burden on the states. So Attorney General Eric Schneiderman is going to sue over this. I don't know the suits go.
Well, none of this is final yet. It's just all in the scare us to death stage.
Well, they passed it.
They passed it in the House.
Yes, and when the Senate passes a bill, it has to go back to these same people in the House.
Yes.
Look,
they could get nowhere with any of this.
That's that would be better than what they're proposing.
Absolutely. Now, we did succeed in scaring them on the religious executive order. When we were here a week ago, we were telling you that we were anticipating or fearing a very broad religious exemption order that would allow anyone, most companies, certainly any religious organization, individuals to claim a religious belief that would allow them to override every non-discrimination law in this country, and certainly any that had to do with sexual orientation.
Now, Trump, in writing an executive order, has to relate it to federal powers and the powers of the executive branch, but he is also in favor of legislation that would do this. The First Amendment Protection Act, it's called, and
Defense Act.
Defense Act.
But that's not what this is. They had written a proposed executive order in February that got such bad press and reputedly Ivanka blowback that they didn't do it then. So then the religious right comes back and says, look, we really, really, really want this. You have to do it. And we have the National Day of Prayer coming up, and we're all coming to the White House. So you better do something.
Yes, because going into the National Day of Prayer, he had an A+ on abortion, anti-abortion, but only a C+ on anti-gay.
So then there was evidently a knockdown, drag-out in the White House between Ivanka and Mike Pence, the vice president, over how extensive this order should be. And this is the rumor. We weren't there.
Well, let's talk about the result.
Yes.
I mean, the goal.
I was getting to that.
Okay. Well, the goal here is to shoot down what's called the Johnson Amendment, which was passed in the 1950s, which basically bars nonprofit organizations, churches, from doing direct political endorsement of candidates and things like that.
Correct.
It's a very good thing. Why? Because these are tax-exempt organizations. If you also let them go on so that they can do direct political action, well, then the Koch brothers can get a tax-deductible donation, give it to the Catholic Church or a fundamentalist group, and then they can do the dirty work, and
and probably
on your dime, essentially.
Yeah, and probably not have to publicize that donation either.
That's right.
So this was, so it turns out they cannot get rid of the Johnson Amendment unless Congress acts. So they can't do that. But here's what they decided not to do the broad religious exemption for discrimination. So what they ended up doing was something that the ACLU now calls an elaborate photo op with no discernible policy outcome, although it portends future harm.
Yes, that's not the feeling of the Human Rights Campaign, which says it's a sweeping approach that could result in unprecedented expansion of religious exemptions affecting employment services and programs.
Well, what it did was order the IRS not to be so diligent about enforcing the Johnson Amendment or other rules about no political work by churches specifically, I think. Maybe mosques and synagogues, probably not other nonprofit organizations. Let's give the churches a break. And also told the Attorney General of the United States to consult with all federal departments to figure out just how much they could discriminate on the basis of their religious beliefs in the federal government.
I mean, the ultimate goal is to let religious people do what they want to do on all of this. And that means things like even if you worked for the Social Security Administration, you wouldn't have to dirty your hands processing Social Security claims from homosexual married couples. Things like that. That's what their game is here. Now, he sat down to dinner the night before this with the Southern Baptist pastor Robert Jeffress, who said that 70% of gays have AIDS and said there's a link between homosexuality and pedophilia. Franklin Graham, don't have to explain who he is. James Dobson from Focus on the Family, and Michelle Bachmann. I mean,
they plotted all this out and how they were going to describe it. But the ACLU and Lambda Legal Defense were all teed up to sue if this broad religious exemption executive order was issued, and they pulled back and said, we're not going to sue yet because this doesn't do anything substantive yet. We're going to wait and see how this plays out, see whether this is just all his usual bluster signifying nothing, or whether it gets followed up with some action that does require a lawsuit.
Okay.
But in the end, that's a win for us for keeping the pressure on and keeping the spotlight on this.
You think all the news is bad here?
So the day this was issued was the day that Trump finally showed up in New York on the Intrepid for a dinner, and we were out in some force demonstrating against him. Here are a couple of signs. There's the Intrepid in the background, and that sign with the pink triangle, that's a Housing Works sign, so they were out there.
And the other sign says, immigrants yes, Trump no.
Yeah, fake president. Now, a bunch of Rise and Resist people, a little affinity group, went down to the Wall Street helipad where he was coming in on the helicopter from JFK, where Air Force One landed, and they had made individual letters that they cut out, and like in a football stadium, they arranged them and held them up, and it said, "Go away, loser." In his face as he comes in on the helicopter.
He didn't sleep in New York, where his wife and child live.
Well, she went with him to the dinner, so I don't know whether she went to Bedminster with him.
Imagine that.
All right. A couple of other notes before we move on to other news. The log cabin Republicans sent a group of their transgender members to a meeting with the Department of Education to say, look, really, can't we talk about these transgender student guidelines that they should have gone to talk to Jeff Sessions, since he's the one who really got rid of them. but maybe Betsy DeVos can slip some stuff in. I give them credit for going to have
did
the
you read
conversation.
their guidelines? I mean, they lean heavily on like single serve kind of things. And
Well,
all that kind
I
of
would
stuff.
like them to be more progressive than that,
Yes.
but at least they're going into the belly of the beast. Today, as we're taping, is all the aftermath of the Comey firing, as the foreign minister of Russia is meeting with the president and the Secretary of State. So,
And let's not forget Henry Kissinger, also sitting there next to Trump.
war criminal. So Sarah Huckabee Saunders gives the press briefing, and she's asked, I think by Chris Johnson of the Washington Blade, oh, by the way, in the middle of all this Comey stuff, did the president or the Secretary of State bring up Chechnya and all the gay men being arrested and murdered by the authorities with the Russian foreign minister? Oh, I don't know. I wasn't there in the meeting. I don't know.
And then she said, who cares anyway?
He's making that up.
That's kind of she's very snarky, that woman.
Yeah. And follow up on the health care bill. Sean Patrick Maloney, congressman from New York, who, you know, we've
tangled with before.
We have criticized his votes with Republicans in the past.
Yes.
But he came up with a very clever idea, I thought, this week, which when John Faso, Republican congressman in the neighboring district, would not hold town hall meetings with his constituents.
And he did vote for the repeal of the Obamacare bill.
Right. Sean said, fine, I'll go talk to your constituents. And he did, and he held a town hall meeting with the constituents in Faso's district to great acclaim, and very publicly and nationally said, all of us should be doing this. We should be going into neighboring districts. We should be talking to the constituents of these people who will not hold town hall meetings.
Well, that's a good idea because
right on, Sean.
You never know what your next district is going to look like.
Well, I think it helps then Democrats who are going to run in those districts.
We also don't know what's going to happen to the Stonewall National Monument. We told you that it might be under threat because they're reviewing all the designations made by President Obama, where he designated this a national monument, so it could be a national park. Well, we left out a detail. When they announced this, they said, we are only looking at land areas of 100,000 acres and more, and I don't know what little tiny percentage of an acre this thing is.
Well,
but
it's because they want to do oil and gas drilling on these lands, and we do not yet know of any oil and gas available under the Christopher Street Park, other than gas lines.
Well, I was going to say Bloomberg allowed a radon thing to come in from New Jersey over there. But anyway, but it's still possible because it is on the hit list that Republicans want de-designated.
Given the people who have Trump's ear and the vociferous nature of their lobbying, anything could happen to us at any given moment. But
and something else that's happening on the federal level, we had Art Leonard on here last week, the law professor, and he says that this past week, the Second Circuit, which is where we live, has gotten a lot of petitions asking for full en banc review of the decisions that they've made around is sexual orientation discrimination, sex discrimination. So that's heating up here in New York because there have been some bad decisions here in the New York area because of the precedents that we've had here.
Well, it's all the more reason to be worried about these judges that Trump is appointing because they're the ones who are going to end up making the decisions, and the Supreme Court ultimately.
The goal is to get it done fast. I mean, I heard rumors this week that Anthony Kennedy wants to retire in June, but
there are always rumors about the Supreme Court.
Well, they are in their 80s.
Yes. Well, presumably they'll disappear at some point.
Okay, some state news?
As will we. Yes, let's hopscotch the states. Alabama.
Yes.
Governor Kay Ivey, who took over recently from the nefarious Bennett.
Yes.
Has signed a law allowing non-publicly funded adoption and foster agencies to reject LGBTQ families.
Right.
These are agencies that are state licensed, but don't necessarily get state funds. But it allows them to reject same-sex couples from fostering or adopting children.
And we're getting worried about Texas because we were able to beat back most of the anti-LGBT, or all of them, the last time, right? But this time, the House has passed a measure that would allow child welfare organizations, including adoption and foster care, to discriminate against LGBTQ parents.
They're really on this kick about these adoption and foster agencies.
And it would forbid the state from canceling contracts with agencies that subject children to conversion therapy. And then the Senate passed a bill that would make it difficult, if not impossible, for transgender youth to participate in scholastic sports.
You'd think these people would have something better to do with their time, but
Than hate
evidently
us?
not. We're number one.
It's a winner.
Well, in Louisiana, the House there has changed a domestic violence bill so it won't refer to marriage in a way that includes same-sex couples. In a domestic violence bill.
Well, and that goes to the Tennessee bill, doesn't it?
Yep.
The Tennessee law. Now we told you that it passed and that the governor signed it. And the core of the law is that you have to give the natural and ordinary meaning to terms in state law as a way of, well, if it says husband and it says wife, then it doesn't mean wife and husband and things like that.
A husband is a husband. If you have two men, you have two husbands. How do you need to reinterpret those terms?
Well, there are 4 same-sex couples that are suing over the law, including there are 4 lesbian couples who have conceived a child using a sperm donor are filing because they note that when a man and a woman have a child with donated sperm, the husband is automatically given legal rights to the child, and they argue that Tennessee's law does not guarantee them those same rights.
Certainly threatens that.
And Art Leonard again weighs in on this, and he said it could lead courts to conclude that they are not allowed to interpret the words as their gender-neutral equivalents.
You may have thought North Carolina was quieting down, but no. In North Carolina, a couple of things. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit against HB 2, the horrible law that has been repealed, are now switching over. They are going to file their lawsuit against the new law, which is just as bad.
And one of the groups that was instrumental in getting the new law passed was the Bank of America. Now this is
not a group; it's a company.
Okay, this is big news because the Human Rights Campaign is actually rejecting $325,000 in sponsorships from Bank of America because of their direct role in passing this new bad law.
The substitute.
That's a new precedent.
They've also
turning down money.
They've also cut their rating in the Corporate Equality Index. Both Bank of America and Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina have had their HRC rankings dropped drastically because they worked on passing this new law. Now, I'm sure both those companies thought, oh, we're going to help fix this.
For themselves.
Yeah, well, and the governor, our friend, the new governor, signed the law. So it's all ugly across the board.
Well, and New York State has joined many other states and cities that have reaffirmed that we're not buying this, and we are maintaining our boycott of non-essential travel to the states. There's another North Carolina story.
Yeah.
Well, this is... 2 really horrible North Carolina high school students were arrested because they did what they call catfishing of a teacher. They pretended to be a 35-year-old gay man. They got a nude picture from him on Grindr. I think it was Grindr. And so initially he got suspended, the teacher, right? But now they have transferred him after a Change.org petition to another school. There are people supporting him. They're letting him return. And these guys have been arrested for this.
Good. All right, in a couple of other ugly stories, in the state of Washington, the out gay mayor of Seattle, Ed Murray, has announced that he will not run for re-election. He had said earlier that he would in defiance of charges brought against him, but now he's saying, no, I'm not going to run again. He was charged with sexually assaulting minor young men 30 years ago,
Right.
when he was a young man himself, but of legal age, and he was accused of paying them for sex. I think there may have been charges of drug involvement. He denied these charges. There was a charge like this a few years ago that he successfully beat back, but more charges have arisen now. He says these have all been manufactured by right-wing groups like the Alliance Defending Freedom, who are trying to drive him out of office. We don't know the truth of any of these stories. I think he may have known these guys, what happened, what the ages were, what the consent level was, who knows. But he has now decided that he is not going to run for re-election.
Well, on the other hand, the Los Angeles County Democratic Party Chairman Eric Bauman is fighting back against charges like this. He's been targeted by false rumors of engaging in inappropriate behavior with 14 and 16-year-old boys. He's running for state party chairman. And so he's fighting back against it, and he's saying it's totally baseless. He's outraged by these tactics. And he said, I can't stay silent. He sent an email to everybody. He said, I can't stay silent about this. None of this stuff has happened. It's being used by my enemies, and I'm fighting back.
Awful story out of New York City where a trans woman, 59 years old, was found beaten on a sidewalk in Chelsea, 29th Street and 7th Avenue. Died a couple of days later at the hospital. Her name is Brenda Bostick. She is the 10th trans woman murdered that we know of since the beginning of the year.
I mean, they know it was a homicide. They're saying it is a homicide,
Yeah.
but they're not. They don't have any idea if it was a hate crime or. But
No
she's
idea.
dead.
Yeah. And the owner of the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, where 49 people were murdered, has announced that she is turning the facility into a museum, a memorial, raising money for scholarships for family members of those who were killed and injured. There was some discussion a week or two ago about why she had refused to sell the place, and
Yeah.
now we know because she is turning it into a museum.
That's good.
In Iowa, at the University of Iowa,
Jane Mayer.
Yes.
Yeah. She won her discrimination case there, and a jury awarded her anti-lesbian discrimination, and jury awarded her more than $1.4 million.
We have a picture of
been the
her.
athletic administrator there,
Yeah.
ruling that the university had discriminated against her because of her gender and her sexual orientation.
She had been in the process of defending her girlfriend, who was fired as the field hockey coach, who is also suing. And they're also claiming that they were paid less than men in similar jobs. So congratulations to Jane for winning that suit, and good luck for the rest of their
And did we talk about
lawsuit.
the bad bill they passed in Florida? The
No.
House. They passed an overly broad religious expression legislation that would require school districts to adopt a limited public forum policy, potentially allowing student speakers to make anti-LGBTQ statements
Oh, yes.
masked as
Free
religious
speech.
expression at school events. It now heads to Governor Scott for his signature. He's not our friend.
In Colorado, by a vote of 18 Republicans to 17 Democrats, the Senate has rejected lesbian Heidi Hess for a seat on the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. She already served there for 4 years.
But listen to the objection to her by one of the senators. This is the lady that advocates for sue your boss and other things. Well, when you're discriminated against, you have to sue your boss. But I guess you don't like that.
You may have trouble getting another job, but it's a valiant
She
thing
says,
to do.
well, I think that would be a conflict of interest for her.
Oh, really? On the Civil Rights Commission?
So this is because, the LGBT community is pretty upset about this in terms of having representation on this panel and having this woman voted down. She's a longtime activist. Outrageous.
I am holding my breath for Chelsea Manning's release from Fort Leavenworth next week.
Yep.
I still think the Trump administration is going to find a way to interfere with this, but she is due out next week after serving 7 years, the longest sentence ever served by a whistleblower.
President Obama was pretty tough on whistleblowers.
Yep.
He was.
Well, she finally got her, pardon, sentence commuted, whatever it was from him. Trump has deeply criticized this decision, so I am concerned about whether she will actually get out, but she is due for release next week.
Good news from Guam, where a gay couple won a battle to have the birth certificate for their kid get both parents' names on it, but now they're fighting to have legal fees paid by the government.
Yeah. In New York City next week, May 20th, we are going to have the first Brighton Beach Pride. This is Rusa LGBT.
We are.
Russian LGBT people who live here, who we've worked with as activists over the years, and they have decided, brilliantly I think, to take their fight against homophobia into the heart of the Russian immigrant community in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, with a march on the boardwalk on Saturday, May 20th. Everybody is invited.
And we intend to go if protest isn't banned.
Well, I would say this has sort of two different moods. On the one hand, we will certainly be raising the issue of what's happening in Chechnya and protesting that and the horror of people being arrested and murdered. On the other hand, we are also bringing a message of pride and joy for LGBT people into that community for the first time. So we'll have Gilbert Baker's big rainbow banners. Anybody who wants to bring a sign, feel free, or just show up. Gathering starting at 11 a.m. on the boardwalk at Ocean Parkway in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn.
You can get out there by the subway, just take the subway to Coney Island.
Yes.
A lot of subways go to Coney Island.
I think the F, the Q, maybe the D.
Everything goes to Coney Island.
To the end of the line.
Yes.
And you can have a day at the beach. And we'll be marching on the boardwalk starting at noon. That'll last maybe an hour, a rally at the end of that.
Should be fun.
Then you can go to Nathan's for hot dogs.
The last time I was there, when all the people were jumping in the ocean on New Year's Day. With
It'll
the
be warmer
polar
with
bears.
any luck.
Yes.
Although not terribly warm right now.
And mark your calendars, because on June 14th, Flag Day, we're going to have the Memorial March for Gilbert Baker. There's the new sign that's been created for it, and we're going to meet at the Stonewall at 6 p.m. and march over to Hudson River Park, and we're going to remember Gilbert through his banners and through some
flags
talks, some of his words and everything else. We're looking forward to that. We will be there for that.
Now, there, on the other hand, is a dispute going on in D.C. about their pride on June 10th. There's an organization called No Justice, No Pride, which has been trying to negotiate with D.C. Pride, the regular organizing organization, about getting corporations out of Pride, getting the police out of Pride. This is a tension that is only escalating around the country. D.C. Pride is not willing to cut back on those participants, and so No Justice, No Pride is promising to hold a competing event, an alternative event on June 10th. And then on June 11th in D.C., it's supposed to be the big sort of national resistance pride event.
It wouldn't be the first descent in a pride parade. I can
Heavens,
remember
no.
we split the New York into two and had one rally in the lower part of the park.
Oh, that was Stonewall 25.
No, that's another one.
Yeah.
There were two marches on Stonewall 25.
Yes.
But once we took the regular Pride March and we stood around the Plaza Hotel and said, come into the park here. We're not going to their rally. Well, you know, we had disagreements about things.
We are a diverse
Can't
community.
we all get along?
No.
And can't we have more than one rally?
But we need to get along in the face of the Trump administration.
Yes, we do.
One other footnote, HRC has teamed up with the University of Connecticut to do a national survey of LGBTQ teens, ages 13 to 17. If you go to hrc.org, you can find the teen survey. and take part in that. And then we can get some national information about who's out there and what they're up to.
And all these events and websites and things that we talk about, I do my best to include them in our weekly email. So if you want to sign up for our email, go to our website, www.gayusatv.org. You can sign up for our email. You can actually watch the show on there if they're cutting it out in your area or you're not getting good reception. We're always online.
Or subscribe to the podcast there so you can have it as audio anywhere, anytime.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
So, international news.
Yes.
Speaking of HRC, they held a demonstration outside the Russian ambassador's home over Chechnya this week.
Yes, they did. And there was also a demonstration in Russia, in Moscow. LGBT and others held an anti-Putin demonstration, which surprised people because it really was extensive, and no one was expecting people to be able to speak up that loudly and in those numbers against Putin. So maybe he's getting some pushback he's not expecting.
Right. May 17th, we should remind you, is the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. It's more of an international thing. There are some observances of this in the United States. It's also Jack Kennedy's 100th birthday.
Now, in just a couple of other notes about Russia and Chechnya, there are now reports that there are as many as 20 gay men who have been murdered by authorities in Chechnya. The Russian LGBT network, which is in Russia and is attempting to evacuate people from Chechnya, says they've gotten at least 75 calls, and that was probably a week ago, so that may have escalated. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has made a general statement that we should not use human rights concerns as leverage in our international dealings.
Well, it's not America anymore.
All right, so we told you about Brighton Beach Pride. We told you about the HRC, Amnesty International, and Human Rights First.
Let's
demo
go to
at
the
Russian
Ukraine.
Embassy. Putin has now, and the Chechnyan leader have grudgingly said that they'll investigate the reports, but they're still denying there are any gay people in Chechnya. As an uncle,
they're working on it.
Well, there's a report of an anecdotal report of an uncle pushing his teen nephew to death off a balcony because he was gay.
We have heard that some of the families take care of this through an honor killing. Once they find out, the police don't have to do anything. They just release them to the families. Now, this is they're basically under Sharia law there in Chechnya.
In Chechnya, yes, and proud of it.
Yes. So let's go to the Ukraine, where we have somewhat better news. They're having the Eurovision Song Contest there now. So they took the Arch of Friendship there, which is usually just a steel gray kind of a thing, and they started to make it into a rainbow thing to welcome everybody. And then the religious right and others started objecting. So what they said they would do, they wouldn't take it down, but all those blank spots there would be filled in with sort of Chechen color, Ukrainian colors, of multicolored stripes there.
So the final of the Eurovision contest is this weekend in Ukraine. We'll see. They have excluded the Russian competitor because she had performed in Crimea.
Okay.
All right. Good news from Bermuda, where a court has ruled that the country must recognize the marriage of two men. They had been refused by the registrar, but the court says that violated the Human Rights Act and was sexual orientation discrimination. This court ruling also overrules the anti-same-sex marriage laws in Bermuda. They've been going back and forth on this for the last couple of years. Public referendum, the legislature, the president or prime minister. So the court ruling appears to be good, but the legislature could also freak out and go pass some new laws that would get in the way of this.
The judge said they're entitled to an order of mandamus, which sounds pretty kinky.
Isn't it mandamus?
Maybe it is. Let's call the whole thing off.
Someone will tell us.
All right. In Indonesia, A police raid targeting gay men in Surabaya on April 30th. Acting on a tip-off from neighbors, a midnight raid, 14 men arrested who were in 2 hotel rooms. Police, they were detained on, they were tested for HIV, given rapid tests for HIV. 5 tested positive for HIV. Well, I don't know what that has to do with anything, but it's outrageous. And they're being detained on laws against pornography, and 2 of them charged with organizing the event and providing pornography, which, now, what's the sentence for this if you get convicted? Up to 15 years in Indonesia.
In China, mothers of gay people held a rally at Huazhong University of Science and Technology to support their children after 2 men had held an anti-LGBT demonstration. The moms held signs saying, "Homosexual children, your parents support you and love you."
It's very nice.
Nice in China. In Tokyo, they held the largest Rainbow Pride event in one of the departments
there. It is.
6,000 people showed up. They're not all in that picture.
And in Singapore, the LGBT rally Pink Dot they've been told they can't take foreign money anymore, so they smashed the local sponsorship target, raising $143,000 from 100 local companies because the government banned them from getting money from overseas. They
have no non-discrimination rights or partnership rights or anything in Singapore, but they hold this annual event that's quite moving. In France, good news, Macron was elected and not Marine Le Pen.
And I was very impressed with him, by the way. And look, he's not our socialist savior or whatever you want to say, but he went to Algeria and accused his own country of war crimes there for its occupational, and which became a big issue in the campaign, and he won. Big.
Yeah, and Marine Le Pen tried to co-opt the LGBT community, and that was just more pinkwashing. And certainly she had a couple of gay aides, but
her Nazi father was very upset that the memorial service for the gay cop who was killed, was turned into a gay rights rally.
And
he said
a lot of her other advisors are not LGBT friendly, so that's okay.
And she said she would repeal same-sex marriage in France.
Yes. And a court in France has rejected letting an intersex person assume a neutral sex designation.
The person was born with a genital malformation, and they're not going to be recognized as neutral.
They probably would not like malformation as
I'm reading the press
different.
reports. I'm reading the press reports.
Yes, but
they are who they are.
Yes, but the court said it would be too much trouble to have anything but a binary designation. In
Nigeria, 54 people went on trial in northern Nigeria on Monday. Charges related to allegations that they were all at a gay wedding. Now, the defense lawyer says it was a birthday party, but they face up to 14 years in prison for celebrating anything gay, and that's what they're up against.
Well, there was a gay wedding in England of Tom Daley and Lance Black. You like that segue?
Yes.
There they are, a little in the distance.
Yes, that's the only kind of pictures they provided, were pictures at a distance, basically, of their wedding.
Tom Daley, the Olympic swimmer, Lance Black, the Oscar-winning writer of Milk.
I didn't realize that when Lance was making When We Rise, he was the writer of that and producer. They had a little bit of a separation. Well, they were apart for 7 months. They took time off from each other, but they've come back together. They also had a little bit of a sex scandal around the time of the inauguration. We totally missed this story. Where Tom was fooling around with some things, and it's the kind of story we might.
He's young.
He's 22 years old, and and Lance was away for 7 months. But obviously, they've worked it out, and they're modern people, and they got married and affirmed their love for each other.
We wish them the best.
Yes.
And we wish the best to Tel Aviv Pride in June, which has as its theme bisexuality visibility, which they say is the first Pride celebration in the world to take bisexuality as a theme. I predict there will be a lot more of this.
Well, more and more young people are identifying as bisexual. I mean, we
Yeah.
would say perhaps most people are, but very few people identify. And Canada now has full transgender rights everywhere except the Yukon Territory. New Brunswick has adopted it, but they got their royal assent. Can you imagine? That's what they have to wait for there. Okay.
All right. Entertainment news.
Well, the winner of the Best Kiss at the MTV Awards this year, and we have a picture of the guys with the Moonlight Actors, Ashton Sanders and Jarrell Jerome. This is the first time a black kiss has won, a black male kiss has won, because they've been doing this for a long time, and they've given it to a lot of gay scenes in the movies, mostly as a joke, joke scenes. Then they gave it to Brokeback, which was an affirmation of it.
I'd give MTV a little more credit than that.
They used to give
But
it to things like
this
American Pie and things like that, where the guys were making out,
Well, that wasn't exclusively what they did. Anyway, this was the middle story in Moonlight, the teens kissing furtively on the beach in Miami Beach. And it was a very moving scene, and it's wonderful that they won the award. And one of them said in accepting the award that this is bigger than us. This is about more than a kiss. This is for those who feel like the others, the misfits.
Yes.
And a very moving moment at the MTV Movie Awards.
And Emma Watson praised the show's decision to eliminate gender-specific acting categories there.
Yes. And I think she received her award from Asia Dillon, who's the non-binary character and actor on Billions, who has done a terrific job on that show and been a very intriguing character.
Okay.
And a very major character on that show.
I have finally seen Pacific Overtures by Stephen Sondheim. They're reviving it at the Classic Stage Company under the new artistic director, John Doyle, and starring there, as you can see him in the middle, George Takei. Who is the reciter, and they use an all-Asian cast, which is not always done, but they use modern dress, and it's a very stripped-down production, but a terrific one, and it's really a play for our time. It's about the opening of Japan in the 1850s, when the foreign powers, the Western powers, right into the bay and start demanding, you got to trade with us.
And it's Sondheim.
It is Stephen Sondheim. It sounds a lot like Sunday in the Park with George to me in many ways, but it's a good show, a really good show.
Okay. And also getting raves in London is the new production there of Angels in America.
Yes. This stars Nathan Lane. Well, what picture do we have first? That's Andrew Garfield as Pryor
Walter.
And I have the name of the other gentleman here. Okay, it's Nathan Stewart Jarrett as Belize, the nurse, and so they're starring in it. And in the other picture we have Russell Tovey as. Do we have the other picture?
It'll be coming up any
second. We have Russell Tovey as Joe Pitt, the Mormon guy. Nathan Lane as Roy Cohn, the monster.
Shocking.
And Denise Goff as Martin Heller in Angels in America.
Now, the reason we tell you about this is because you're going to be able to see it here in the United States.
Yes. There's something called National Theater Live, NT Live. Go to ntlive.com and you can read about where this is going to be shown in your area.
In movie theaters in the United States in July.
I've been going to these for years, and it's July 20th and 27th are the first showings, but they're going to repeat it in August, and you can see it again. You can see it in Omaha, you can see it in Hartford, you can see it anywhere.
As you may or may not remember, because actually the original production was quite some time ago, it's two plays, Millennium Approaches and Perestroika, Angels in America for both of them. And so it will be shown in two parts in July and again in August. And it's such a magnificent Tony Kushner play. The language is unbelievable. The plot is compelling. It's so moving and so worth seeing. You may have seen the movie version on HBO or the play in a theater, but you just can't get tired of Angels in America.
And these actors have gotten great notices for what they've done. And there are lots of cultural events in London marking the 50th anniversary of the decriminalization of consensual homosexual relations. And the National Theater is having a series of readings of gay-themed plays July 6th through 11th, including our friend Tarell Alvin McCraney, a wig out, Martin Sherman's Bent, and even a 1927 play called The Drag by Mae West.
I just want to remind you of something we've talked about before that is still on at the Japan Society Gallery, and that is their exhibition, A Third Gender, Beautiful Youths in Japanese Prints. These are prints from the 17th through 19th century. This is, this is 400 years ago, 300 years ago.
Wait a minute, didn't we invent homosexuality in the 1960s?
Yeah, exactly. Our associate producer, Bill Bowman, has been to see all this and gone to some of the lectures. They're just stunning, these prints. And if you're in New York, you will do yourself a favor by getting to the Japan Society Gallery. This runs through June 11th. You have a few more weeks to see it. A Third Gender, Beautiful Youths in Japanese Prints. And on June 9th, they're going to have a Third Gender Pride Ball at the Japan Society. So check that out at japansociety.org.
I think when I was giving you the gay angle on the Tonys last week, I think I left out Andrew Rannells, who was nominated for Falsettos for Best Featured Actor in a Musical. He played Whizzer. More Broadway news. The out gay actor Telly Leung is taking over the title role of Aladdin on Broadway. There he is. And that's a good show, by the way.
Now, I get a little confused on TV between American Crime and American Crime Story.
Yes.
American Crime is the ongoing anthology series where the same group of actors plays a different plot line each year. But American Crime Story has aired they've done just one season. This is Ryan Murphy's season. They did the OJ, The People versus OJ, that won every award in the world. Sarah Paulson playing Marcia Clark. So now he's doing his second and third years of episodes of American Crime Story.
And it's the assassination of Gianni Versace.
Well, that's going to be the third one.
All right.
The second one is going to be Katrina. That's coming up shortly, I guess. But 2018 is going to be Versace American Crime Story.
And guess who's playing Andrew Cunanan, the killer? We have a picture of him. We do Andrew Cunanan. It's Darren Criss. There he is. He's on the left there. He's pictured there with Max Greenfield, and we don't know who Max Greenfield is playing yet. But Darren Criss, who's a big Broadway star, and he was on, of course,
Glee.
Glee is going to play. He looks like him there, Andrew Cunanan.
Well, they have roughed him up a lot because he was very pretty on Glee.
The gay killer.
Yeah. So there are going to be 10 episodes of that, and that all took place in 1997.
And they're shooting it at the Versace
at the mansion in Miami,
Yes.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. All right, so anything else?
I got a correction for last week. I said Anastasia on Broadway had been a Disney film. It was a Fox film. Maybe if it had been a Disney film, it would have been a better production. We've been telling people about deconstructing Patti LuPone. That's been it was supposed to be this Sunday. It's been delayed until September. If you looked into that.
Okay, so check out our website, gayusatv.org. For details on parades and everything else. And
sign up for our emails if you want all the links to these things.
We will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And now we have to figure out what we're doing for the promo.